Salam alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me to this extremely important and timely regional meeting. I am the coordinator of Social Watch, which is a network of civil society organizations holding governments and international organizations to account for the promises and the commitments that they themselves made. We have come year after year with independent reports demanding always more. It is our job, after all, to be permanently unsatisfied. But never before, since the creation of Social Watch in 1995, have we faced such a dire situation as today. It is a well-known fact already that none of the 17 goals agreed by all governments of the world in 2015 will be met. None of them. Even worse, for the first time since it is being computed, the Human Development Index is going down. Around the world, poverty is increasing, hunger is increasing, disease is increasing. Women suffer more violence and discrimination. Children are starved. They are massacred by bombs and bullets in Gaza, and they are maimed by conflicts and malnutrition around the world. At the same time, biodiversity is being eroded. The climate is disrupted, and the global economy is growing. Did I say that right? Yes. Some good news, finally. The stock markets are booming. Now, how can the economy be performing well and the people so badly? The only explanation is a massive increase in inequalities. The 2030 Agenda was very courageous to incorporate Goal 10 to the list of goals to be achieved by 2030. Goal 10 is about reducing inequalities within and between countries. Yet, both inequalities are increasing. People are increasingly poor, and at the same time, in my region, Latin America, the number of billionaires has multiplied in the last 5 years. And that is happening in other parts of the global south as well as in the north. A recent study shows that 6 billion people, 80% of the world population, live in countries undergoing austerity, which is a policy also called fiscal consolidation. What that means is cutting public budgets, cutting essential areas like education, health, social protection, and privatizing public services, cutting social security rights. And that in turn exacerbates gender inequalities because all around the world, women are the shock absorbers. They do underpaid or totally unpaid care and domestic work to absorb those shocks in their families. To rescue the SDGs, calls have been made to accelerate their implementation. I can imagine this is well intentioned, but if we are marching towards a cliff, we should not accelerate, but rather stop before we reach the precipice and change direction. The decision by major developed economies to raise their interest rates has increased dramatically the external debt payments of developing countries. At the same time, when development assistance flows is decreasing. Actually, you will say, no, he's wrong. The ODA statistics shows record numbers of official development assistance. Yes, but this is because the support to refugees internally in the donor countries is counted as ODA. The actual concessional disbursements to developing countries are decreasing. At the same time, the promise of $100 billion annually to combat climate crisis have never materialized. Illicit financial flows out of developing countries are on the rise. And the major share of those flows, as has been shown in different reports, does not come out of criminal activities, drug trafficking, and so on, but the illicit financial flows are mainly the responsibility of legally established transnational corporations that, through different mechanisms, profit shifting to fiscal havens and so on, don't pay taxes and transfer their profits out of the countries where those profits are generated. And this is why the United Nations has recently decided to start negotiations towards a UN tax convention. Addressing the General Assembly of the United Nations last September, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that it is clear that the systemic problems of financing for sustainable development require a systemic solution: reform of the global financial architecture. That architecture, said Guterres, was created at a time when many of today's developed countries were still under colonial rule. It is deeply skewed in favor of the developed world. The basis of that financial architecture has not changed in 75 years. It reflects the power relations of 75 years ago. And even though the World Bank, for example, claims in its building very prominently, our goal is to reduce poverty, the countries where poor people live are not represented. The institution is in the hands of the G7 thanks to those mechanisms of voting according to shares. They don't allow countries, even if they want to, developing countries to have more shares, and only one country, and you know which is the country that is, has veto power in both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So at the end, it is about money, yes, but it is not just about money. The UN is based in three pillars: sustainable development, peace, and human rights. Let us say that again: sustainable development, peace, human rights. All three are being threatened, shaken by that cataclysm that some have baptized the polycrisis, multiple simultaneous crises. And I quote the Secretary General of the UN again, when he said only a few days ago, last February 16 in Munich, and I quote, "Our world is facing existential challenges, but the global community is more fragmented and divided than at any time during the past 75 years. Today, global order is not working for everyone. In fact, I would go further and say it is not working for anyone." That is the voice of the Secretary General of the United Nations. And he went on to elaborate about how multipolarity, which can be a good thing, is actually also creating chaos when countries have, and I say, they do whatever they like with no accountability. Impunity seems to be the name of the game, and so we must all be determined to establish the primacy of the rule of law. Now, what the head of the United Nations is saying is that governance is at the center of the concern, and global governance needs badly to be reformed. We need to be able to hold governments to account to stop genocide from happening. We also need to be able to hold international organizations to account when they impose policies that can plausibly lead to massive human rights violations, such as the austerity policies. The institutions that prescribe that recipe and make it conditional to their funding and to the renegotiations of the external debt. Now, to reform the governance of those institutions, which is the key of reforming the international financial architecture, does not mean only to have more developing country voices in the board. It also means to put human rights the whole variety of economic, social, and cultural rights, and the primacy and the accountability to the policies, so that the human rights violations are not accepted, and so that the external debt is defined not in terms of the creditors and their ability to recover their loans, but in terms of the debtor countries and their ability to fulfill their human rights obligations and then pay to the international creditors. Governance issues are sustainable development issues, and the high-level political forum should start dealing with those issues and should demand a revert in the current trend so that we don't march farther into the abyss. Additionally, and that is the hope, these issues are explicitly in the agenda of the Summit of the Future next September. Last February 7, talking to the General Assembly of the United Nations about his priorities for this year of 2024, the Secretary General said, "Our world badly needs 5 things. Reform of the Security Council. 2. Reform of the international financial system. 3. Meaningful engagement of youth in decision-making. 4. A global digital compact to maximize the benefit of the new technologies and minimize their enormous risks. And finally, 5. An emergency platform to improve the international response to complex global shocks." He summarized these 5 demands in the expression "a safer world and a bigger pie." That should be the objective of the Summit of the Future in September. Actually, that objective can be formulated better, I think, in other words. And I quote, "Justice is placing everything in its proper place, and it is the foundation of social life. Without justice, the social life and the state will collapse." That was said not by the Secretary General, but by Ibn Khaldun. And my hope is that those words that were said 7 centuries ago can become the guidance of our world leaders in their negotiations to make the Summit of the Future a path towards justice. Justice means social justice, gender justice, climate justice, and also plain old justice with courts and judges, nationally and internationally. As civil society, I can assure you that we will be contributing to your efforts to reshape global governance in a just, inclusive, post-colonial way. And we will be watching. Shukran.